Cadillac. If there's a brand that understands luxury, it really is them. I mean, throughout the 1950s, 60s, and even the 70s, the best luxury cars you could buy were from Cadillac. It even used the tagline, the standard of the world. Imagine that. That's how confident they were. Ask your parents, your grandparents, what their definition of great is, and they'll probably still tell you Cadillac. My dad even says today, the Cadillac of this, the Cadillac of that. Unfortunately, Cadillac wasn't always the standard of the world. I mean, throughout the 80s and 90s particularly, they really got hit hard by the European car makers and the Japanese brands who came later on with companies like Lexus, Acura, and Infiniti. These brands proved that Cadillac, well, wasn't exactly the standard of the world anymore. Cadillac products were becoming kind of crappy, to be honest. Meanwhile, the Germans and the Japanese kept bringing out better products. Through it all, one model kept the brand together, and that model was the Escalade. This is the 5th generation Cadillac Escalade, and like its predecessors, it's basically a GM pickup truck with a body on top of it. It's based on the new GM T1 architecture, and it pretty much features all the technology General Motors has to offer. These things come in either two colors, white or black, depending on in which gang you're in. Since we're in Montreal, I decided to go with the East Coast gang, so mine is painted all black. The Escalade needs to be big because when you buy one, you're basically telling everyone, I have a lot of money and I do not give a crap about anything. To put things into perspective, I'm 6 foot tall and the hood comes up to my chest. Now, even though this thing is big and humongous, you don't need to be big and humongous to buy one. As a matter of fact, it really adjusts to your height. As you can see right here, when you open the door, it gives you a nice little step down here, which allows you to easily step inside the truck. From the outside, it's just a big black box. Follow me, and I'm going to show you the almost infinite amount of options this Cadillac has to offer. So at this point, you're probably wondering why. Why does the Escalade still exist in 2020 in a world where everyone wants to become electric and we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint? The answer is Cadillac is selling quite a lot of these things. In 2019 alone, they sold approximately 50,000 units in the US and Canada. When grouped all together, General Motors SUVs, large SUVs, which means the Escalade, the Chevy Tahoe, the Suburban, and the GMC Yukon, total more than 300,000 units sold in North America. They are the best-selling full-size SUVs in the world. Why do people like them? Well, you're getting a truck to begin with. So underneath the body, like I said earlier, it's a Chevy Silverado, which means it can tow up to 8,000 pounds. Then you have the fact that it's enormous, immensely luxurious, comfortable, and oh so smooth. I'm driving this thing right now on a pretty beaten road, and even though it's a body-on-frame architecture, it doesn't feel like it. I have air ride suspension, Magna ride suspension as well, which adapts according to the terrain. Where it really makes big strides is in the technology that you're getting. I have in front of me a 38-inch screen. Yes, it is the largest screen to have ever been fitted to an automobile. I just want to remind you that in the late 90s, 27-inch was big for a television, which is ironic considering that we're not allowed to play with our phones, but we're allowed to play with a 38-inch screen while we're driving. So in order to better explain what this truck has, I'm going to pull over and show you all the toys you'll get in an Escalade. All right, so let's begin with the dashboard setup right here in front of me, the gauge pod. So the first thing you're noticing, it's a conventional gauge pod with a speedometer, RPM, and fuel gauge, everything you get in a modern automobile. However, here on the left, I have another menu, again, part of the gigantic screen, which allows me to alternate what I see here in this tiny one. I have the gauge, I have map, which displays the navigation. That's expected from a car of this price. By the way, this thing sells for $125,000. My God, that's expensive. Then you have the augmented reality camera, which I find pretty cool. What it basically does is it replicates what you see in your windshield, almost as if you have a second windshield down here. You may be wondering, but why? Why would I want a second windshield? Well, this camera sees what your eyes don't. Because this truck is so big, it allows you to see, for example, children or animals or pedestrians that are passing in front of the vehicle. The irony, however, is if you look at the resolution in this screen versus the resolution in the backup camera, it's not the same. I have 4K resolution here, and I have what seems to be very pixelated early 2000s resolution for the backup camera, which is kind of odd because now I have literally a cinema in front of me, but the resolution is not the same. Now back to the backup camera though, as you can see, you can have the normal backup camera, you can have the wide backup camera, you can even have overhead where you see a very crappy representation of the Escalade. This kind of looks like Grand Theft Auto 1. And then you have slide, which allows you to see on each side of the vehicle. That's perfect, and when you're doing a drug deal and you sense that the police is coming, you can run away. But back to this screen right here, I want to talk about night vision. Now, of course, now it's daytime, but I had a chance to play with it during the night. And the purpose of this feature is to see further than your headlights or to see further than your sight, what your eyes can see. Meaning that if there's a pedestrian walking in the dark and you haven't spotted them, the system will tell you. Then I have the HUD, which is the heads-up display. Now, you don't see this, but in the dashboard, I have another display, which shows me a whole bunch of information that I can customize myself. I can change the brightness, the height, I have the speed I'm going at, I have the speed limit of the street that I'm on. Basically what this truck does, it really makes you lazy because you don't need to do anything. All you need to do is look, move your head like this, like that, and occasionally press a button. Now back to the center. There's a whole bunch of more technology here. The main layout I find looks quite good. I have user settings, so I can personalize my own user setting. I can create a profile, I can associate it to the key, I can change how the seat adjusts when I get inside the vehicle, I can also go with my ideal climate and my favorite music. I can modify everything to my liking directly in this screen. And one last feature I find quite innovative is the NFC touch connectivity. Usually when you arrive in a car and you want to connect your phone to it, you need to go fiddle in the settings and fiddle with the Bluetooth on your phone, but not in a Cadillac. Let me show you. Just take my phone, I tap it here, and it's connected. Finally, there's all the trailering apps and the available cameras. Now, I mentioned the rear view camera, but there are more. You literally have a three-dimensional view of the truck. Now, I just find that Cadillac could have maybe worked a little harder in the way this vehicle is represented because it really looks like it's made out of only 2 polygons. If you go to the trailering app, you have the hitch and you have the camera directly on the hitch, so you can always monitor what's happening with your trailer. Usually you only get this with a pickup truck. And if I go back and I play with the trailering app, basically I can just fiddle with this thing for minutes on end to make sure that the trailer doesn't ran into my very expensive rear bumper. So obviously if you're a professional rapper, you'll want to sit in the back of your Cadillac Escalade and get driven by your chauffeur. As you can see, I got the Cadillac specific headphones, which I can configure on one of the 2 screens I've got back here. And there's a slew of cool things that I can do with this screen. I can connect my own phone. I have connectors down here if I want to connect, for example, a PlayStation or a DVD player. I can even control my own navigation, and I of course have my own cup holders. One feature I find particularly interesting, and when I was saying that this vehicle makes you lazy, I don't even need to tell my chauffeur where I want to go. I can just punch it in the screen, because after all, we now live in a world where screens do everything for us. We don't even need to talk. For instance, let's say I want to eat some Chinese food. I just click on the navigate screen right here. I hit search, and I have the food menu, so I click on food, Chinese. I'm going to choose the first one right here. And then what I do is I send it to my chauffeur. My chauffeur then decides to accept or a... What do you mean you ignored? Are you stupid? So back on the road with this new Escalade, I just want to talk a bit about the architecture. Last year, before this thing was announced, General Motors invited me to Detroit to see the mechanicals of the vehicle. They had a stripped out Escalade where you could see the architecture. And, you know, they were talking about the suspension and the way that it was set up, but they also hinted at the fact that this vehicle will eventually be all electric. you probably saw the 600 number out the back. The number you're seeing there is the torque figure in Newton meters of torque. And why in Newton meters? Because soon cars will all be electric, and that's the way that you measure torque in an electric vehicle. So yes, expect this thing to be fully electric in the near future. Meanwhile though, the 6.2-liter V8 engine is surprisingly peppy. When I gun it, and it takes a bit of time to downshift, it really gets going. There's something rather interesting about going fast in a vehicle like a Cadillac Escalade. You're really telling everybody on the road, get the hell out of my way. This new Escalade then really raises the bar of what you should expect from a full-size SUV, and in my opinion, it really is the best interpretation of I do not give a crap on the road. More importantly though, it's quite well put together, it's packed with high-end technology, it's properly badass. I reckon that even though it's $125,000, you are getting quite a lot for your money. Now I'm looking at the time and I believe it's my appointment, so if you'll excuse me, I'll be right back. Hey man, you got the money? Yeah, you'll see man, it's some good shit here. Oh crap, the cops!